DBS community, welcome back to another video here with Chris, and today we're going to go over the state of green going into Ultimate Squad. So make sure you guys like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you guys can keep up to date with the channel, as well as if you want to support the channel, there is a Patreon link down below. You guys can check the stuff out there. So we'll go here into kind of what we're looking at for green, and green has been arguably the worst color in Dragon Ball. A lot of that comes to a lot of the really key staples were very expensive for a very long time, which is also weird, being the worst color and having some of the most expensive staples, really staples that kept their value much higher than they probably should have, right? And there hasn't really been many playable green leaders, unfortunately. We've had kind of a mix between 1 and 2. Most people would probably just say the 1. So there hasn't really been a lot going on. But currently the best green deck in the format going into Ultimate Squad, and this is also prior to the Cell deck being released, was King Cold. King Cold was the best green deck. It's the best generic good green deck, although you're playing a ton of field spells. The deck itself is just, it's very fluid. It knows what it's going to do. It's very consistent. And that's kind of what it's been. There hasn't really been a green deck since. Cell Surge, I don't even consider most of the hand destruction decks. I don't really like the decks that focus nothing on but hand destruction. I don't even consider them green, like, because that's kind of its own separate thing, right? It's like playing Sin and calling it a yellow deck. It's not. But the gatekeeper, I would say, for green, I guess, is Gotenks. There's not really been another one. Unfortunately, I was gonna say Cell Surge, but obviously that one's gone. But Green Gotenks has been a deck that has found its ways into topping. Is the deck good? I don't find the deck to be particularly very good. I think the deck is very average. I think what the good part about this deck is that the deck does have a very high ceiling for someone who really knows how to pilot the deck and they really know the matchups. I think most people would have more success with a deck like King Cold as opposed to Gotenks, just if they're going in just looking to play a green deck. Now we have some upcoming decks. We have Meta Cooler and Cooler, which we'll get into a little bit later in the video, and a few rogue decks that we will probably see, whether it's local, online, or in real life events. We have Broly Evil Unleashed, which is the starter deck Broly leader. We have another starter deck leader, which is the Frieza The Last Resort. And then we have the Reboot Cell leader, which also has its own deck. It has an expert deck. Now the Broly deck is very similar to, actually the Broly deck is probably the best pure hand destruction deck in the game. It finds a lot of success over in the Asian region, and there's people who have brought that over here who have played it a little bit. Probably the best pure green hand destruction deck you're gonna play right now. It's nothing compared to what Cell Surge was, because you have to attack and you have a lot of limitations on what you can do. But the deck is very good, and I think people who play this deck, they have to really like hand destruction. Moving on to another sort of hand destruction deck, which is the Frieza deck. Frieza is a little more limited because you can't play Saiyans. Not that there's a ton of really good green Saiyans, but it is limited by that. But the deck is cool. You can give a unison crit. You can rip cards from your opponent's hands essentially every turn. Potentially 2 on your awakened turn, and then more after that. And the leader has just never really found its way, I guess, into the meta. It's been piloted by a few people, myself included. I have a very, very early, I think it's a store championship that I won with the Frieza leader. I can't remember, it's been a while. But that leader was fantastic. I actually love that Frieza leader. It just hasn't really seen too much play, but you can definitely see maybe possibly someone play with it, and if they know the deck very well. The deck is actually very scary. You do kind of have to worry about it, but it's not something you should practice against because you're not going to see a lot of it. Something you should kind of practice against will be the Cell Reboot leader, and Cell is, I would say, arguably the best green deck in next format. I think right now it's in the rogue slot because it has, I think Trevor, shout out to Trevor if you watch this video, Broken Honor, or Broken TCG, I think is his name now. But he, played at the, I think it was the Nashville event. He was the only Cell player there, and I think we've had maybe one event since then, and I don't think anybody top was Cell. So he probably the only person I think I know of that's played Cell at least well. That's not saying that it's not going to happen soon. We have a lot of regional stuff coming up, so there's definitely going to be some Cell players there. And Cell's a deck that I've also considered as well of playing, just because I think the deck is incredibly powerful. And who doesn't like ripping your opponent's hand completely away on turn 5? It's incredibly annoying, incredibly difficult to deal with. Now going into the first deck here, obviously is King Cold. This is a kind of a list that you would possibly see going into the next set, including or not including the King Cold promo that's coming out, which is kind of like a floodgate essentially. But since this deck was essentially kind of pre-built already, it's going to be the same going into this set. The biggest difference is that you don't have fighting against fates anymore, so you have to run another unison. And in this one, we picked the Bardock unison, the Bardock Overrealm from the Anniversary box, which is a 4 Overrealm cost, free energy cost, of course, and it is a draw 2 and pitch 1, essentially giving you another Paragus super combo effect on your Overrealm. So just another 20k body. Still a very powerful card. Definitely something that I think this deck could utilize very well. So that's why we added that one in here. And going over the Reboot Cell leader, there's been multiple different ways that people built this leader. I think Reboot Cell is incredibly powerful. There's not a lot that this deck loses to, right? I think red is a big problem for this deck. So any deck that has red built into it, right? And unfortunately, red is going to be very popular in this next format. Or we would, so it seems, right? U7 is still probably the best, most frequent, the most frequently visited deck in the format. And we have Goku GT coming out, which is aka Great Value Time King Piccolo, or Piccolo, yeah, King Piccolo. And it's something that this deck struggles with heavily, is dealing with red. It does not have a good red matchup at all. Every other matchup, not too bad. The 8 drops stay on board pretty well, and the deck just flows very, very well. You get to turn 5. If you have the perfect force Retro Generation, your opponent essentially loses. They just lose all their cards. You play Xenocell, bada boom, bada bang, you're done, right? This list here is pretty good. The Demigra and the Surprise Attack are just kind of bonuses that you can add in there. Those slots, I think this is a 50, maybe a 52 card deck. I can't remember. But it's very, those slots can be taken up by anything. You have a few other, Android 18s and 17 cards that you can play. You can play, Healing Pod. Bupo's on here. I think Bupo, if you have the Oceanus negate, I think Oceanus is actually a better negate because Oceanus is going to be very good just with, stopping your opponent from attacking unless they want to mill. Well, this card just makes your opponent pitch cards from their hand. It's, it's not as good, I guess. But yeah, no, I think Cell's great. I think Cell should probably be something people should be looking at going into the next set. My problems would be probably red. I think this deck has a interesting red matchup. You have everything kind of comes from the side deck, which is kind of where this deck also struggles, is that because these are going to be best of 1 formats, right? But they're going to be pre-sided. So a lot of these decks are going to come in and you have to figure out if you need to pre-side against a particular deck. And it's not going to be best of 3, so you just have to be better than them and hope that, you're able to survive whatever it is that they're going to throw at you. In a traditional best of 3, I think this deck struggles slightly. I think in best of 1, I think this deck does very well because you don't have a lot of outs in best of 1. You can just kind of run what you need here, and then you just need to get to turn 5 and then kill them. Now the 2 new decks coming out. We have 2 cooler decks. We have Meta Cooler and Cooler Galactic Dynasty, aka Unison Cooler. Now there's a very vast difference in these 2 decks in power levels. Meta Cooler is probably one of the lower tier decks in the set, if not the worst leader in the set, while Cooler Galactic Dynasty is looking to be one of the better leaders, if not the best leader in the set. I think there's some interesting play lines with the deck. Being a deck that generally is just basically playing unisons, it's something we've actually never seen before, right? Like the Yellow Goku deck does it as well, but it doesn't do it as well, right? Like this deck being a deck where you're like, okay, I'm mainly playing unisons. This is something that's very new to our game. And it's something that's very difficult to interact with because there's no cards outside of Dragon Slaying Bullet that really interact with unisons themselves. So, quickly go over this meta cooler list. There's 3 different meta coolers now in the game, so you can run yellow green, you can run green red, you can run mono green, you can run a tricolor build. I think it's all very just blah, you know. But I think green yellow is probably the best since you can run some of the older yellow cooler stuff, which the 5-drop I believe gives all of your meta coolers double strike, which is pretty cool, right? A lot of energy requirements for this stuff, and you're playing through, you know, if you're playing through top meta decks, it's not gonna, you know, do so well. This is definitely something that you can take to your locals and have fun though. So definitely a cool little deck. Now, Cooler Galactic Dynasty, however, this is a deck that you will probably end up seeing at your locals. It's probably what you're going to see if you're traveling for tournaments, both in person and online. And this deck has a lot going for it. For one, the ability to combo a unison, and I believe this was confirmed. But we were trying to figure this out. So the auto says when one of your unisons is placed in the drop area, you draw a card. When you pitch a card off of an effect, when you discard an effect, the discard is essentially the card being placed in the drop area. So if by that knowledge, when you activate battle and you pitch a unison from your hand, essentially will trigger your auto if you have not done that for the turn, which allows you to draw, essentially turning one of your unisons per turn into a pseudo combo. This is very powerful. This is very, very powerful. And that's, I mean, I don't think there's an official ruling that's come out for it yet, but this is how it should be ruled because of the effect of what a discard actually does, or what the definition does, I should say. So, but you run heavy unisons, probably close to 20 unisons, because all of your unisons on your awakened side become 5k combo power. One card that can end up causing this deck a lot of problem in the late game would be something like the 8-drop Fu, right? Where your opponent, every time your opponent activates a skill, they warp a card from their hand, and essentially activating this battle is, you know, doing that, right? But outside of that card, like, you know, any other deck, like your deck never really feels dead at any point because you can just combo these unisons off, and you have counterplay unisons, and it just makes the deck flow very well. Definitely something that anyone who's traveling for, you know, regionals for this format should definitely get some practice in against Cooler, because this is going to be a deck that we're going to see at top tables for sure. Now, speaking of Cooler deck, there are 2 cards that I think obviously everyone should kind of know about. If you're going to be playing Cooler, or if you're playing green, I would just pick these up. You have Salza, Cooler's Armored Squadron, and Golden Frieza Newfound Might. Now, what's interesting is that the Salza here, your leader has to be a green Frieza Clan card, right? So it doesn't just need to be Cooler. So you can play this. So you can actually probably play this card in, I think, the green Frieza starter deck leader, and potentially King Cold. I can't remember actually off the top of my head if King Cold is a Frieza Clan or not. He actually may be Frieza Army. Let's just scroll back here a little bit, and we're gonna look, because I can't remember if he is. He is Frieza Clan. So, actually pretty helpful. So that means you actually can play this card in King Cold. Not saying that you would play it in King Cold, but you have the ability to. But it's essentially a charismatic villain in the form of a unison. So it's uninteractable. Even a card like Koitsukai doesn't hit this card. So it's kind of a problem. And then you have the Golden Frieza card, which is the same thing as a counterattack, and then it kills all of your opponent's battle cards. eventually, essentially could be considered a negate if your opponent's swinging with something and you play this. And again, there's no interaction with this because we don't have counterplays on unisons yet. Now, I have a feeling that this is something that's going to get power crept very hard, where we're going to get just counterplays for every color. Hopefully every color gets them. And then this card can also turn into a 10k triple strike. And it already has dual attack, so it's swinging 30k triple strike twice. That's a lot, right? So there are a lot of cards. There are some cards that you can technically use to counter unisons. I won't really go over them too much. Just to keep some secret stuff, right? But there are definitely some cards, if you look them up, there are definitely some cards that actually interact with unisons and can kind of hinder some of the progression that this deck actually has. And then 2 cards in green that you guys should look at for if you guys don't already have. It's going to be Demigra, Unison of Sorcery. This is a unison from essentially when the first set of unisons came out. It's been played in every green deck since. And it's a great 1-drop to play in the cooler deck, just allowing you to self-awaken as well as keeping a unison on board so you can empower into your other unisons and then just kind of continue up your unison chain. And then you have Blue Impulse because you're going to be playing a lot of unisons in the cooler deck. This is a 1-cost board wipe. If your opponent plays a battle card this turn, you choose all your opponent's battle cards and you KO them. And this is a 1-cost extra card if you have a unison in play. Now we do have, obviously we have the Frieza, and that can also be used as well. But if you don't have Frieza or you don't want to spend 3 energy on Frieza, you have this 1-drop extra card that does primarily the same thing as long as they played a battle card this turn. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the set. If you guys got pre-release stuff, let me know what you guys are going to be playing, whether it's going to be green or a different color. I would love to know down in the comments. And as always, thank you for the support, and I will see you guys in the next video.